Have you ever watched a crime show where the detective dusts for prints and says, "We've got him"? That single swirling pattern on a glass or a doorknob can solve the entire case. But have you ever stopped to wonder how we figured out that these tiny ridges on our fingers are so powerful? In fact, for most of human history, these unique markers were completely overlooked. Today, we re-dive into the fascinating story of what sparked the need for fingerprints and how they became the ultimate identifier. It's a tale of crime, identity, and a few brilliant minds who saw what no one else could. Before fingerprints, how did you prove you were you? Or, more importantly, for law enforcement, how did you prove a criminal was the same person you'd arrested before? It was a huge problem. People used tattoos, scars, or just detailed written descriptions. Imagine a police report saying male, about 6 feet tall, brown hair, scar on left cheek. How many people could that describe? Thousands. Criminals could easily change their names, move to a new town, and start fresh. It was chaos. Police departments were desperate for a reliable, unchangeable way to identify people, especially repeat offenders. One of the first systems to tackle this was the Bartillon System, created by a French police clerk named Alphonse Bartillon in the late 1800s. It was incredibly clever for its time. He proposed taking 11 different body measurements things, like the length of an arm, the width of the head, the length of the middle finger. The idea was that the combination of these measurements would be unique to each individual. This system, called anthropometry, was a huge step forward. For the first time, police had a systematic, data-driven way to catalogue criminals. It was adopted by police forces all over the world. It seemed like the perfect solution, but it had a fatal flaw. The problem was, these measurements weren't always precise. Different officers might measure slightly differently, leading to errors. Plus, a person's body can change. Younger criminals might still be growing. And then came the case that broke the Bartillon system. In 1903, a man named Will West was arrested and brought to Leavenworth Penitentiary in Kansas. As they took his Bartillon measurements, the records clerk was sure he'd seen him before. He pulled up the file for a man named William West, and the resemblance was uncanny. Not only did they look identical, but their Bartillon measurements were nearly the same. The problem: they were two different people who looked alike and had almost identical body measurements. And that's where fingerprints step into the spotlight. People had noticed the ridges on fingers for centuries, but mostly as a curiosity. It was Sir William Herschel, a British officer in India during the 1850s, who first started using them for a practical purpose. He had local people put their handprints on contracts to make them feel more official and binding. Over time, he noticed something incredible. A person's fingerprints never changed, not over decades. He started collecting prints and realized each one was unique. Around the same time, a Scottish doctor named Henry Faulds, working in Japan, also became fascinated by fingerprints. He even used them to solve a small crime at his hospital, identifying a thief who had left a greasy print on a beaker. Faulds was the first to suggest that fingerprints could be used to identify criminals. He wrote a letter to the famous naturalist Charles Darwin, who passed it on to his cousin, Sir Francis Galton. Galton was a scientist who was obsessed with measurement and classification. He took the ideas from Herschel and Wells and ran with them. He even created a system to classify them into different pattern types, like loops, whorls, and arches. This was the crucial step. It wasn't enough to know prints were unique. You needed a way to file and search them. He read about Galton's work and developed the first functional fingerprint filing system in 1892. He used it to solve a brutal murder case. A woman had killed her 2 children and blamed her neighbor, but a bloody fingerprint at the scene matched hers, and she confessed it. This was the first time a murder was solved using fingerprint evidence. It made headlines around the world. Then, an official in British India named Edward Henry, who had also been corresponding with Galton, developed his own classification system. The Henry classification system was so simple and effective that it was adopted by Scotland Yard in London in 1901. From there, its use exploded across the globe. After the Will and William West fiasco at Leavenworth Prison, American police forces were eager for a better method. They adopted the Henry system, and fingerprinting became the new gold standard for personal identification. So, the need for fingerprints wasn't sparked by one single event, but by a growing crisis of identity. It was a problem that needed a solution, and that solution came from the combined work of several dedicated individuals across different continents. The next time you see a detective dusting for prints, remember the long and winding road it took to get there. It's a testament to human ingenuity and the relentless search for truth. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into history.